A new amendment to the House Republicans' Obamacare replacement bill exempts members of Congress and their staff.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show, Around the Nation, right here, TYT Nation. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf. We've got a pretty good show for you guys today. We still have a lot of stuff to cover. We've got Trump's tax plan released. I've got some of the details here. We're going to talk about that and how it will affect, of course, him. Because, again, I'm thinking in Trump terms, well, how is this going to affect me? Am I going to get richer? Great. Let's pass it. Let's get it done. Tax reform. Go. We've got that. We have some changes to the Obamacare replacement bill. Yeah, they're still trying. They're still trying to do this. They're still trying to talk about this. Some of the changes will, of course, piss you guys off. That's fun. Rich people living longer, which, hey, look, not a bad thing. Okay. Except that nobody else is living longer. In fact, everybody else is getting screwed. I have the details on that, especially how you're getting screwed. Bill Nye goes after CNN on CNN. That's kind of fun. We'll enjoy that. And then we have a Texas woman fired for not being a Christian. It has come, Christian Sharia. So it has come to Texas. Maybe they should ban that. Just saying. And then if we have time, Hannity goes after liberal fascism in response to the sexual assault, sexual harassment allegations, which have then been retracted. It's a really complicated story. So I might actually come out a little bit on the side of Hannity while also ripping him a new asshole for blaming liberals. So that's wonderful. So yeah, we've got all sorts of interesting, fascinating news today for the show. So hopefully you guys stay around for the next hour. Right now I'm going to find out the new patrons of the day, give some people some Patreon shout-outs for supporting the show, for helping to keep us on the air, to keep us independent, non-corporate sponsored, and of course, again, to keep us on the air mainly. So let me get some shout-outs here. We have two new patrons. One new patron from yesterday, Rogue X. Thank you, Rogue. And let me get to some more patrons, kind of mix it up here a little bit. Let's find this. We have Sven Riddell. Thank you, Sven. We have, let's see, Andre Martin, Dirk Kelly, Nicole D. We have Michael Miller, Vaughn Jenkins, Raphael. I'm sorry, I cannot see your last name. Sheesh. I'm terrible with names. I'm sorry, but thank you. I love you anyway. Michael DeVoe, Tabby Lab, Nikki Shins, and Richard Magnuson. That's kind of an awesome name. Magnuson Straw. I love it. So thank you guys. I love you guys for supporting the show. Patreon.com/TYTNation. If you want to be a patron, support independent progressive media, keep us on the air, and keep us doing great content. Okay, so I'm kind of like, I know I've been on a let's go and attack the Democrats, let's go and attack the Donald Trump. Not doing as much of that today as I showed you on the breakdown. We do have, of course, Trump's tax plan finally being released today, and we have some of the details on that. So we're going to go in that. That's our lead story of the day, and then we'll go into some of the other stuff. So strap in, man. It's gonna be a fun show. All right. Now, the details of Donald Trump's tax plan are starting to come out, and boy, is it a bonanza for the rich. Now, this is just like I was warning you guys. Donald Trump, he's not here to help you. He's here to help himself. He's here to help himself make money. And his rich donors, of course. Donors being primarily the Mercer family, Rebecca and Robert Mercer, who basically want to see their taxes cut really, really low. Now, let me show you how low some of these taxes are going to go. Now, here are some of the details on this bill. It's from the Hill. This bill will include a proposed cut on foreign profits received by American companies, okay, and a reduction in the top tax rate for pass-through businesses from 39.6% to 15%, according to the Wall Street Journal. So that is a corporate tax cut from almost 40% to 15%. Disaster. Now, Trump's plan will also eliminate a lot of income tax brackets for individuals. And basically, he's going to do what he said. I'm going to simplify the tax code. Which, again, if you simplify a progressive tax code, that means that it's going to save wealthier people a lot of money. Now, you also have the elimination of the alternative minimum tax. Now, of course, that's the tax that rich people pay. All right, this is something that rich people primarily pay. When you eliminate that, you're going to save millions and millions of dollars. In fact, Donald Trump himself once had to pay $31 million in the alternative minimum tax. He does not want to pay stuff. He does not want to pay that. Now, basically, the whole purpose of the alternative minimum tax was to prevent very, very rich Americans from using their deductions and loopholes in order to skip out on taxes. You can still take those deductions, you can take those loopholes, you'll still save some money, but at the end of the day, you still have to pay something. And rich people, Donald Trump, are like, oh, no, alternative minimum tax, we hate that. We want to pay no taxes. We carved out these loopholes and exemptions into the tax code so that we didn't have to pay our fair share. And now you're saying we have to pay something? Well, shit. We're going to get rid of that. And now that we have full Republican control of the House and Senate and the presidency, we're going to try to make sure that that happens. So they want to, again, eliminate this alternative minimum tax. Now, it's interesting. You've got massive corporate tax cuts, the elimination of the alternative minimum tax. And, of course, there's some other stuff in there, right? And no surprise, it's going to primarily benefit the wealthy. You have the expanded child and dependent care credit that he wants to increase. Okay. Or actually, he wants to push for this. Well, wait a minute. Well, that sounds kind of nice. There's a child care credit, right? Well, yes and no. Because this tax primarily benefits rich people. Almost 70% of the benefits going to families with incomes in excess of $100,000. So yeah, it's going to help primarily rich people. It might help a few poor families, more middle-class families, but again, primarily rich people. And of course, he is proposing to increase the standardized deduction, which currently rests at $6,300 for individuals and $12,600 for families. Now, so those are some of the details on his tax plan. Obviously, there's more, but nobody seems to be asking the question of how the hell do we pay for this? Okay, already this is a bonanza for the rich. They're going to save lots and lots of money, and this is going to blow up the deficit, right? Well, nobody asked that question. Now, many tax experts have expressed some concern that some of these tax cuts would significantly increase the budget deficit. So, they're the ones that are asking. Tax experts like, hey, man, isn't this going to blow up the deficit? Well, you have Finance Committee Chairman Senator Orrin Hatch telling the Associated Press on that issue that, quote, he's not convinced that cutting taxes is necessarily going to blow a hole in the deficit. Now, wait a minute. No, I'm not convinced it's going to blow a hole in the deficit. What are you talking about? We're tax cuts and we're going to have all sorts of wonderful growth, right? And we're not going to have the deficit. The deficit's not going to explode. So, on that point, let me ask you guys, what do you think happened during the Bush years? Turns out I've got a little handy chart to show you what happened to the deficit under the Bush years. Oops. Bush era tax cuts. You see that little tiny sliver in orange? I mean, bigger than every other fucking thing on this graph. That's the effect of the Bush era tax cuts on the deficit. Oops. That is huge. That is bigger than the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq combined. And of course, you see that tiny little sliver of light blue? That is the recovery measures. That is the Obama recovery. Right? That is the stimulus package that Republicans howled about. Oh my God, the deficit! You're blowing up the deficit with these all this spending. We can't spend so much. All the while, the Bush era tax cuts. I mean, you see this. You see that. That's from the Center for Budget Policy and Priorities. That's amazing. But no, Hatch is like, he's going to ignore data and facts, of course, and say, quote, I actually believe it could stimulate the economy and get the economy moving. Oh my God. No, the only thing that this budget is going to stimulate is rich people's wallets. Look, you have to understand, this is a gigantic transfer of money to the richest Americans. Look, I don't think your voters voted for that. Because most of your voters, not necessarily super rich people. Yes, obviously there's some. But man, you think the guy sitting in, in Appalachia, okay, the coal miner that they talked to, do you think he voted to give rich people more tax cuts? Or do you think he voted to, hey, why don't you help me? Why don't you do policies that are going to help us? Well, how does that help you? How does a giant tax cut from 39.6% down to 15% for corporations, how's that going to help you? It's not going to help you. They're not creating more jobs. We already give massive tax cuts to the rich, and that does not have a positive correlation or impact on jobs. Cutting taxes does not create jobs. What creates jobs is demand. And what creates demand is, well, people having money, regular people having money, not just rich people having all the money. And that's the problem. No, see, the thing is, that guy didn't vote for that. But Rebecca Mercer, however, who gave the Trump campaign $13 million, well, they absolutely love this. That's what they want. They want deregulation, and they want massive tax cuts for themselves. Now, furthermore, this might not be the end of this. If this tax cut passes, 15% corporate taxes, you think that's going to be the end of it? No. Check this out. Hatch said this, quote, whether 15% is the right figure or not, that's a matter to be determined. Now you might be thinking, but maybe they'll raise, once they see that it's not working, that it's blowing up the deficit, well, that means they're going to raise taxes back, right? I mean, Ronald Reagan, that's what Ronald Reagan did. He raised taxes 11 times. Well, no, not necessarily. See, the current crop of Republicans is so ideologically bound on the idea of we must have no taxes, zero taxes. That's what our donors tell us that they want. That will make them stimulate growth. But that doesn't work. This means that later on, when the deficit explodes, if it goes to 15% and there is still no growth, well, he's going to say, well, okay, that didn't work. Let's try 5%. Let's try 2%. Let's try nothing. How about zero corporate taxes? Let's go with that. Have the corporations not pay a damn thing, a penny. And then we're going to have economic growth. How much do you think you're going to have to cut taxes in order for there to be some economic growth? They're not going to stop at this, dude. When are you guys going to get it through your heads? Republicans. The Republican Party is not out there to help you. They are the party of the rich. They don't care about you. Their job, their only job, is to get maximum return for their donors. And you can extend that to some of the Democrats as well. And the Republicans are more than happy to blow up the deficit to do it. Now, I remember Republicans howling and screaming and crying about the deficit back under Barack Obama. Oh my God, it's 20, the debt, the deficit. Oh my God, $600 billion. What a huge, huge deficit. The debt's $20 trillion. Oh my God. Unsustainable. Can't have it. We're going to have cut. Now when Republicans get control, yes, they cut, and then they throw more money into the military. And then they decide to do gigantic, enormous tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. The people who don't need a tax cut. These are the people that don't pay very much. They've also gotten much, much richer than they have before. The income gap between the richest 1% and the 99% of Americans is at the widest level that we've seen. I mean, this is 1920s level. This is before the Great Depression level of income inequality. And the wealthy have taken all the gains, and we have taken all the losses. This tax plan is going to add billions of dollars to the debt, to the deficit. Oh no, but don't worry, the Republicans say. It'll stimulate the economy. Look, man, how much more proof do they need? Do regular voters need that trickle-down is a grotesque failure? I mean, we've already seen it. We have low job growth under these low taxes, okay? And historically, we are at low taxes. Believe it or not. Since Ronald Reagan lowered taxes, incredibly low. When we had the so-called Great Society programs, the 1960s, 1970s, we had much, much higher taxes on the wealthy. Oh, and guess what? Things were actually a lot better. And we also had strong unions. We had higher minimum wage relative to today's dollars. Now we do not have that. We have a grossly unequal economic system. And that's not good for anybody. That's not even good for the rich long term. What good is making products and having all this money if nobody's actually going to buy your stuff? Because nobody's going to be able to afford to buy your stuff. Debt is at record levels for consumers, credit card debt, student loan debt. There's only so much money you can squeeze out of the middle class. That is rapidly disappearing. And what is their answer to it? Corporate tax cuts for the richest Americans. It's insane. It's a grotesque failure. Now, Bruce Bartlett writes in the New York Times that the way that Hatch thinks that, oh, if we just cut taxes, then we're going to have economic growth. Again, it doesn't work. Now, they call this dynamic scoring, right? And he writes that this is just another way for Republicans to enact tax cuts and block tax increases. It is not about honest revenue estimating. It is about using smoke and mirrors to institutionalize Republican ideology into the budget process. I couldn't have said it better. It's all about, trying to put their ideology in the face of facts that prove them wrong to get their ideology anyway, because that's what their donors want them to do. It's all about pleasing the big money donors whose greed is insatiable and has no end no limit. We have to get politicians in there that actually represent us and will have the fortitude to fight back against the donors and Wall Street, the donor class, and actually put in progressive policies like progressive taxation and make sure the rich end up paying their fair share so that we can actually, take care of America the way that we're supposed to. Okay. Speaking of Republican hypocrisy, we have some more. Hooray. All right. Here we go. House Republicans want to change health care for you, but not themselves. Now, this is according to an article in The Hill. There's a new amendment to the Republican ACA replacement, the AHCA. Now, this amendment is, again, they're still working on this health care bill. Again, they're going to try to bring it up at some point. And right now, they're in the middle of negotiation. Now, I told you before, there's a negotiation between the Freedom Caucus, the most extreme members of the Freedom Caucus, who basically want to punch poor people in the mouth. And then, of course, the so-called moderates, who aren't exactly all that moderate, but they realize that they fucked the poor too much, then they're going to get killed in 2018 at the polls. Now, so they're trying to do these amendments. They're trying to fix this thing, so that they can actually get this passed. And one of their ideas is actually exempting members of Congress and the staff from the effects of the ACA replacement plan. Not the ACA, but the replacement plan. So, in essence, the changes that they're making to the AHCA, to Trump Care, are so bad that GOP congressmen don't even want them. That's insane. Now, what changes am I talking about? Well, the new changes to the bill would allow states to apply for waivers to repeal key Obamacare provisions, such as the protection against people with pre-existing conditions being charged more and the requirement that insurers cover a range of health services like prescription drugs and mental health. The GOP amendment exempts members of Congress and their staffs to ensure that they will still be protected by those Obamacare provisions. So basically, let me break that down. Not even Republicans want these changes. They are so bad. They would rather keep those protections for themselves, but screw you over. Take those protections away from you. I got mine, fuck you. Now, look, something tells me this isn't going to be popular with the voters, okay? But nonetheless, this is one of the changes they think that that will get conservatives and conservative politicians on board for this bill. The ones opposed to the AHCA, of course, in these changes overall, again, these are the people that are going to get murdered at the polls by their constituents in 2018. I mean, there's a lot of pissed off people. You saw these town halls. I've showed them to you, where there were just, throngs of angry people talking about, hey, you're gonna take away my health care. Don't mess with my health care. Leave the ACA alone. I actually like it. Or at least, if you're going to do something, try to work with the Democrats. Try to actually fix the actual problems, which is rising premiums and deductibles and the lack of insurance plans, where you have insurers that were leaving the market in certain places and essentially giving companies a monopoly in certain states. Those are the problems. Now, I think, of course, and this is backed up by evidence, that Medicare for All is the only real fix for the ACA. But they're not going in that direction. They're actually going in the other direction of making the AHCA even worse. Look, pre-existing conditions protections in the ACA happen to be incredibly popular with the American people. Again, that's one of the things that people brought up in these town halls. In fact, you had a recent Washington Post ABC News poll that found that 70% of the public wants pre-existing conditions protections to apply nationwide and not be up to the states. So you know that there's a lot of conservative states that would rather not have these pre-existing condition protections. Oh, you want to protect people? Well, we don't. Why? Because that costs us money, and we're not interested in spending money on our own citizens. I mean, who does that? Who spends money on their own citizens, really? They don't understand what it's like. They don't understand what you're supposed to do in government. You're actually supposed to serve the people. But they don't believe in serving the people. They believe in serving their donors, and their donors don't care. Because they can afford, health care, health insurance with pre-existing conditions. Now, the Freedom Caucus, of course, thinks, again, I don't care what the American people want. I want to punch poor people in the face. I want to kick them in the teeth. Okay, I don't like them. I don't care about them. I only care about me. Again, this whole fight over the ACA, the Obamacare repeal and replace, it was all about trying to save rich people money on taxes. Okay, that's what this whole fight was about. Again, the 400 richest households under the AHCA plan would save $7 million a year. It's a $600 billion tax cut overall. So that's what this fight was all about, and that's why they continue to bring this zombie back up. It's not enough that the American people wanted to put a bullet in its head, and already have, and the Senate, no, they want to keep bringing it back because these rich people, they want their tax cuts. Not only that, but like, you have polls that show that the ACA is more popular than it ever has been. Okay. Now, the GOP proposals, however, that they've added to replace it with, for example, high risk pools, they're not. Trump Care is a disaster. However, Medicare for All seems to be getting a lot of majority support. I think I happen to know where the American people are going, and it's not with the Republicans, and it's not with neoliberal corporate Democrats. It is with progressive policies, priorities. Again, you have a majority of Republicans, even, that are supportive of Medicare for All. And you also have, again, a massive majority of Democrats in favor of Medicare for All. Again, the Democrats that refuse, like the Feinsteins of the world and the Hillary Clintons, they don't get it. They don't understand. They're paid not to understand. They're paid not to do this. They're paid to lose because they don't want to do progressive priorities. They're afraid of progressive priorities because then they're not going to get the money from the donors. And these donors are, of course, giant health insurance companies that are going to lose out big time. But now, again, back to the GOP here. The idea that these people, politicians, are exempting themselves from their own ideas kind of shows you how disastrous and unpopular those ideas are. The GOP, hey, Republican congressmen, they love the ACA, man. They just don't want you to have it. They love their medical benefits, especially because they don't have to pay for it. You pay for it. You pay for their health care programs. They don't want to pay for yours. It's pure hypocrisy from the Republican Party. Again, and the Democrats, any Democrat, any progressive should be able to maul these people in elections. That is, if the DNC would stop basically standing on their balls and actually help out these progressive Democrats, they could actually win. They should be on TV making ads after ad after ad, telling people, "Hey, man, the Republicans, they want to keep, they want to keep the ACA for themselves. They want to keep health care that you pay for, but they don't want you to have health care. They want to screw you over. They want to deny you health care, pre-existing coverage over pre-existing conditions. And if you're a progressive, for God's sakes, push for Medicare for all. Again, 46% of Republicans are in favor, 81% of Democrats. Why are the Democrats not winning every election on running on these issues? Oh, right, because they don't run on these issues because they're paid to lose. They're paid to lose to hypocrites like the GOP, like these Republican congressmen who are voting to keep the benefits that they say that they despise. And the Democrats just sit there and let them win election after election after election. Look, if we want to win on this issue, and the American people are behind us, well, we've got to get rid of those Democrats, replace them with real progressives, and then, after we're done with that, we're done with the neoliberals, we're going to go and destroy those Republicans. Let's get it done. Okay. More disastrous news. Look, you come to the show, you're going to get depressed. Okay, because I have nothing but pretty much all bad news most of the time. All right. So let's go to how wealthy people are living longer at your expense. Now, Americans are generally living longer. Well, scratch that. Rich Americans are living longer. Everyone else seems to be screwed. Bloomberg is reporting on a new study that showed how wealthy Americans are now reaping the benefits of wealth concentration by living longer and drawing more money from taxpayers, while lesser affluent Americans are experiencing a drop in life expectancy. So, look, this is a disaster. This is a disastrous study. And, of course, there are some lessons that we can draw from this, but first let me tell you more about this. Now, based on the latest year of data, the Society of Actuaries last fall had dropped its life expectancy estimates for 65-year-olds in the U.S. by a total of 6 months. The health of middle-aged non-Hispanic white Americans happens to be deteriorating the fastest out of all different groups. Now, wait a minute. Middle-aged non-Hispanic white American. Oh my God, that's me. I'm a non-Hispanic white American who's middle-aged. Holy shit, why didn't I notice? What's going on? I'm gonna die. But seriously. Now, the results of these trends, according to this new study, is the widening gap between wealthy and poor Americans. You've got classic income inequality. Now, look, you have a massive transfer of wealth to the top. Obviously, you're going to have less and less regular people being able to afford seeing a doctor, while, of course, those at the top get the best medical care in the world. And look, the United States does have the best medical system in the world. Medical care, I should say, if you can afford it. So if you can afford it. Now, it gets... Now, if you can't afford that, you're screwed here in America. Now, it gets worse, right? Now, the richest people in the United States aren't just getting an extra several years of life on their life expectancy because, again, they can access better health care and take advantage of the newest technologies and treatments, etc. They're also reaping a financial reward for their longevity courtesy of the U.S. taxpayer. Now, I will get to that in a minute. But first, let me tell you more about the study. Now, the researchers, a group of 13 prominent economists and health policy experts, basically tried to figure out how long Americans can expect to live based on their income. Okay, well, that seems fairly standard. Now, they focused on earnings in mid-career from the years of 41 to 51 in using Social Security data. Now, the results in this, they say, are stark. In 1980, a 50-year-old man in the wealthiest fifth of income distribution could expect to live 5 years longer than a 50-year-old man in the lowest income group. By 2010, the gap between them had jumped to almost 13 years. 12.7 years. We're going to round it up to 13. So it went from 5 years, it doubled. It more than doubled. 5 years to 13 years. Wow. And that is, again, that is in a 30-year time frame. Sad. Disaster. In other words, the poorest fifth of 50-year-old American men can now expect to live just past the age of 76. That is 6 months shy of the previous generation. The richest 50-year-olds will make it almost to 50 or to 89, 7 years longer than their parents' generation. So wealthier people, they're living longer than they had previously before. Not wealthy people, they've actually lost ground. 6 months, yes, but they're still losing ground. As technology and healthcare get better, they lose ground because they can't access this because of the large income inequality, the wealth gap that we have, where they don't have the wealth and the rich do. Well, that's a big problem. Now, for the rich, hey, great. Rich people living longer, I'm okay with that. I want more people to live longer. I just want the benefit to be equally distributed. I want everybody to live longer. Now, again, disaster, right? So income inequality is essentially killing people faster. Now, one thing that you might have noticed, that this was just a study on men. Now, why is that? Is it a sexist study? Not necessarily. Now, the study focuses on men because the researchers considered the data on women less reliable. Not because women are less reliable, not because of any sort of sexist reasons, but they say women's move into the workforce of the past 40 years is what could skew the numbers. For example, because earlier generations of women sometimes had lower reported earnings while having a relatively high socioeconomic status. So again, that's the methodology. It skews the numbers, so that's why they focused on men in this study. Now, while the researchers weren't prepared to produce specific estimates for women, they were confident that women experienced a similar, if not larger, change over time compared to men, citing previous analysis. So they're saying that, yeah, so we didn't study women because the data was incomplete, the data was a bit skewed, but we can assume, looking at what's been happening with women and men, we can assume that you'll at least have the same change among women, or possibly even larger of a change. Meaning more affluent women living longer, less affluent women living not having as high of a life expectancy as, again, their affluent counterparts. Oh boy. So now, how does that play into the financial reward that I asked, that I mentioned earlier from the taxpayer? I mean, again, living longer is an obvious benefit. I would love to live a very, very long, healthy life, and possibly become immortal. That would be sweet. But hey, look, these people, they're also getting more money. Well, how does that work? How are the more affluent getting more money from living longer? Well, it has to do with Social Security and Medicare. It happened. Those programs, which are awesome, and I love them, they're also helping affluent Americans because of the way that they're set up. Bloomberg explains, 3 decades ago, the richest and poorest retirees could expect about the same amount of benefits out of government programs. The richest generally got larger Social Security payouts, both by qualifying for higher checks and living longer. The poorest got more out of other programs, such as Medicaid and Social Security Disability. Medicare offered about the same benefits to rich and poor. So that's what happened before. Now the math is a little different. Okay, wealthier people tend to live longer and therefore can expect to collect more from Social Security over their lifetimes than people who are poor. Not only that, but we've also seen Republicans and conservatives, Donald Trump, not necessarily Trump, sorry. I don't want to incorrectly attribute to this to him, because again, on the campaign trail, he promised specifically not to cut Medicaid, but Mick Mulvaney wants to cut Medicaid, he wants to cut Medicare, he wants to call all those things, and Republicans have no problem wanting to go after these social programs, these great society programs. Now, of course, when they cut those, obviously poor people are the ones to suffer the most. And as you saw, they benefited more from this, and it kind of made up for the fact that rich people made more from Social Security. They got higher Social Security checks when they retired. So, now, I also have to note, and this is very important to the solvency of Social Security, which, by the way, is solvent. It's not going broke. In fact, is running a surplus right now. But it does, in the future, as a result of this, might not be able to pay out as much money like 30 years from now. Okay, so now I have to note that when you make over a certain amount of income per year, you don't have to pay into the Social Security tax. So if you're an affluent person, within the first 1 to 2 months, you've paid all the taxes that you need to do with Social Security. Done. You don't have to pay anymore. Well, that's an inefficient system. If we lift that cap, however, then all the problems with Social Security, and again, it's not scheduled to run out of money. At worst, it would pay 80% of benefits out. If you lift that cap, well, then you could pay it in perpetuity. You can pay it forever. Okay? Now, that's even if wealthier people continue to draw even more benefits from living longer. So, there's that. Now, how much more are wealthy people getting from Social Security currently? Well, I'm sorry. In 1980, a wealthier 50-year-old could expect to collect $103,000 more than a poor American. 30 years later, that gap was $173,000. These results suggest that Social Security is becoming significantly less progressive over time due to the widening gap in life expectancy, according to the researchers. Now, the retirement system looks more even-handed if you include the analysis of all government benefits received and all taxes paid by Americans after age 50. Still, longer lives are giving the rich and upper middle class a big financial boost, especially through Medicare and Social Security, even as the poorest Americans lose ground. Now, look, the way that that's written might suggest that, well, maybe we should curtail Social Security benefits. No, that's not the right way to go. Some are going to try to spin this as, hey, we should cut Social Security and Medicare. Rich people, they're getting too much from it. But actually, it would be a cut to poor people who would be impacted the most. No. See, the problem here, what got us into this entire mess is widening income inequality. Neoliberalism. The fact that affordable health insurance, even under the ACA, is still out of reach for so many Americans. That's what got us in this mess. Outsourcing, stagnant wages, the elimination of health benefits for many jobs, increased stress from increased debt. And let's not forget about the heroin epidemic that happens to be killing some members of the working class. So, now the cure for this is progressive policy. Higher minimum wage, more opportunity for good paying jobs, healthcare that actually covers everybody, universal healthcare that is single payer, Medicare for all. Those are the kinds of policies that are going to close this income gap and actually bring, because again, I want everybody to live longer. I want wealthy people to live longer. I want poor people to live longer. I want everybody to have a decent standard of living at the very least. So it's not like, oh, I want rich people to die sooner. No, that's not at all. I just want poor people to get the same chance. Okay? And look, if you do some of these changes, not only will higher wages close that income gap and actually put it to more a sustainable level, because again, there's always going to be some sort of income inequality. There's never going to be complete income equality, but you can reduce that to a level to where CEOs are not making 300 times more than their employees, where they're making 10 times, 30 times. That still sounds like a lot, but compared to 300 times, not so bad. Medicare for all, of course, will allow people who are not rich to be able to see a doctor without worrying about, deductibles and insurance premiums, and actually get that preventative care, which helps you live longer. Turns out, you see a doctor, you might actually live longer. Who knew? Well, apparently, Republicans don't know. And some neoliberal corporate Democrats also don't know. And look, when you can actually go and see your doctor and get preventative care, you also learn habits maybe that might help you make better health decisions that will help you live longer. Look, in the wealthiest and most productive country in the world, we cannot continue to have all the wealth and all the benefits continue to flow to a small number of people. Instead of cutting programs like this, we need to expand programs. And we can do that by asking the rich, who are now getting more benefits from these social programs. Yes, you know who's the welfare queens? They're the welfare queens. Asking them to pay their fair share in taxes so that they can help lift everyone up and ensure that all Americans will be able to benefit from our country's increasing prosperity. I don't think it's that much to ask. Okay. All right. We still have quite a few stories to go, so let's switch gears. Let's talk about, it's not really a climate change story, but it kind of is. It's like a climate change media story. So let's get into it. Now, Bill Nye the Science Guy seems to be rather disappointed in CNN. Hey man, welcome to the club. I think we're all disappointed in CNN. Now, this specific instance comes from the fact that he was bothered by the idea that they continue to bring him on to argue with climate deniers. Now, this happened to be climate denier William Happer. Now, I want to show you this clip of Nye basically calling CNN out for bringing on climate deniers so they can have debates. Let's take a look.
Bill, tell us what your reaction is to what he's saying there, and what's the most prolific misconception about climate change?
What he claims to not understand is the rate. It's the speed at which we're adding carbon dioxide. And I will say, much as I love the CNN, you're doing a disservice by having one climate change skeptic and not 97 or 98 scientists or engineers concerned about climate change. What you got to get is the speed at which things are changing.
I am very upset with the CNN. Although I love the CNN, I got to say I'm disappointed. You're doing a disservice. Look, man. Hey, if they bring in 97 scientists, 98 scientists to one climate denier, well, look, man, you're actually going to have an accurate debate. Well, they don't want that. That's not good for CNN. It's not good for the advertisers, which are the big fossil fuel companies, by the way. So, look, maybe Bill should know by now that they didn't bring him on to talk about science. The only reason they bring on Bill Nye is to have him fight climate deniers like William Happer. And the reason they do that is because he gets ratings. That's what that's about. So look, they get the ratings, and then they can appear to be unbiased about the issue of climate change. What, liberal? No, we're not liberal. How dare you even try to say we're liberal? Look, we bring on William Happer so he can spew his bullshit talking points. Oh, we're not liberal. No. We're down the middle. We are centrist. We are straight down the middle, man. You can't be down the middle when it comes to facts. Again, Bill Nye should know this, okay? But somehow climate change has become a political issue. It seems to be a political issue in America. Whereas most of the world's like, yeah, climate change is happening, and right now it's doing damage, and it's going to do more damage. Maybe we should fucking do something about it. In America, we're having a so-called debate on whether or not it's real. Insane. And look, again, somehow people seem to think, again, this is a political issue. It shouldn't be a political issue. It's not a left-right issue, okay? It just so happens that one side seems to want to accept facts and evidence, and the other side doesn't want to. And the other side, of course, will cherry-pick arguments and from certain, pieces of data that show the opposite of the conclusions of that data. And I hate when they do that. And of course, they use bullshit arguments. Now, get this. Okay, so they were talking about the the Paris Climate Agreement. And William Happer is going to make just a ridiculous argument. Again, this is sort of the proof that somebody like that shouldn't even be allowed. I wouldn't say allowed, but those talking points are so absolutely ridiculous that having him to debate Bill Nye is adding a false equivalence to the weight of their arguments. Now, let me show you an example of one of these arguments that he's going to make against the Paris Climate Agreement. Let's watch.
William, let me ask you this question. The president will have to decide how to move forward on the Paris Climate Agreement, something that was a pact that was joined by 200 nations with the President Obama a little more than a year ago. The president during the campaign said that he would, quote unquote, cancel that, has not done it yet. How would you advise the president, if you had his ear, on how to move forward on the Paris Climate Agreement?
Well, you have to consider many things. I think on the face of it, it should be canceled. I could imagine that you might want to consider, ties with allies and things like that, that perhaps would make that not advisable. But I think it doesn't make any scientific sense. It's just a silly thing. I think to me, it's very similar to the Munich agreement that Mr. Chamberlain signed.
Wow. Okay. Everybody, bear in mind, this may backfire. If you pull out of an international agreement, other countries may establish what are effectively tariffs on U.S. produced goods and especially services.
So
The other
hold on for a
thing to
second, Mr. Harper. I just want to make sure that you are comparing the Paris Climate Agreement to the appeasement policy.
It's definitely appeasement. Let me add also, that as a group,
How
scientists have
so?
often been wrong in the past.
I don't want to jump beyond that. How is this comparable to Neville Champlin's appeasement of Hitler? How was that an appropriate comparison?
It is an appropriate comparison because it was a treaty that was not going to do any good. This treaty also will not do any good. Anyone who looks at the results of doing what the treaty says can see that the effect on the Earth's climate is, even if you take the alarmist computer models, trivial. It will not make any difference, and yet it will cause enormous harm to many people.
So wait a minute. So trying to actually cut carbon emissions, that's going to harm a tremendous amount of people. How? Holy hell, man. Look, again, I'm not here to litigate the facts on this, okay? But what I'm here, why I'm showing you this is that this is the kind of people that they bring on to CNN who spout these kinds of talking points. You know why? Because, again, this gets ratings, right? See, the facts here, yes, they are incredibly important, but the real focus should be on how CNN seems to be treating this like it's entertainment. What they're doing is that they're booking guests to spar with each other on whether facts are true or not. This is sort of like bringing on a flat earther or somebody who thinks the sky is neon pink rather than blue. Well, I mean, it's all perspective, right? Oh, what do you mean? Carbon? No, not a pollutant. It's one of the earlier arguments he made in the same segment. Carbon's not a pollutant. No, it's green. It's greening the earth. It's good for... Yeah, but carbon may be essential for the atmosphere, but when you put too much in at one time, which was what we've been doing, in a very, very short amount of time, we've put tons and tons of carbon in the atmosphere. We're now at 410 ppms, all right, parts per million of carbon. Well, that's going to have an effect on the delicate balance of the atmosphere and create a greenhouse effect or intensify a greenhouse effect, trapping heat, warming the planet. I mean, this is simple. This guy, William Happer, is a scientist. Or at least he claims to be a scientist, but he seems to be getting a lot of money from fossil fuels. This is also akin to having somebody who, believes that the sun revolves around the earth versus somebody who knows that no, it actually the sun revolves. We revolve around the sun. We are not living in a heliocentric universe. Look, it's ridiculous, and what this does is that it harms discourse, and that's the problem. When you don't agree on what's an actual fact, on what's actually happening, how are you supposed to have a debate? You just sit there and argue about, no, my facts are true, your facts are wrong. Well, actually, you don't have facts, because facts are only on one side. Facts are non-political, facts are non-partisan, and he even said that. The guy even said, well, what are you talking about? Science doesn't take sides. Science isn't political. Well, then you're cherry-picking out scientific fact in order to make your argument. Therefore, you are making it political. Look, and it gives, this whole thing gives credibility to bad ideas. I mean, again, look, you've heard, they always talk about, the debate. There's this big debate on climate change that's going on and the role that humans are playing in it. Well, look, it seems to me, from watching stuff like this, that the only debate is the one they're having on cable news. That's the only place they have the debate. They create these debates by bringing in a fossil fuel show and an engineer, in the case of Bill Nye, or a scientist or a Democratic politician to have these debates. And this so-called debate, also they can go back and say, hey, look, man, look at that debate. Again, this helps CNN's ratings because they're going to fight, helps the deniers, helps the fossil fuel companies, doesn't actually help science. Doesn't actually help anything. Regular people, they're still going to get hurt. by climate change. Yeah, one of the arguments from the climate deniers, well, if you take, no, don't let poor people burn coal in these developing countries, well, you're hurting them. Well, those same developing countries, a lot of them are at risk from the effects of climate change. It's not going to really matter if they can burn coal or not when the ocean swallows their island. Just saying. Or when a drought basically renders where they're living uninhabitable because there's no access to water, you can't grow food, and you have to leave. And of course, that creates a giant humanitarian crisis. They don't mention that. They just say, well, poor people should burn more coal. And since poor people are going to burn more coal, we should burn more coal. Or why don't you let the other developing countries develop, and we should get off the coal and get off the oil, get off the natural gas, because we're no longer developing. We have the technology. All we need is a political will to be able to switch over to solar energy. And in fact, we should do that. And then we should send solar energy and other alternative forms of energy over to those developing countries too, so they don't have to burn coal. This is something that they never talk about. This is a solution that they don't have because they don't want to have a solution. All they want to do is continue to shill for the fossil fuel companies so they can make more money. It's all about money. You have to follow the money. It's, again, instead of talking about any of those issues, all they want to do is they want to have a sparring match between what they're presenting as two valid and equal points of view. And I'm sorry, they are not equal. They are not valid. One is factual, the other is nonsense. And it's all about ratings. And look, that whole segment, that was supposed to be about the climate march. They didn't talk about that at all. So look, I'm not surprised at this point if anybody's if anybody's disappointed in CNN, because I think we're all disappointed in corporate media. They're not doing the right job. They're not doing the job that they're supposed to. Again, they split it down the middle, and they're doing false equivalents, and it helps to call them out. Okay. All right. Let's do one more story. I know I want to get to Hannity's fascism, but I'm sorry, Hannity's liberal fascism, but I can get to that tomorrow. One more story here. Now, a Texas woman has filed a lawsuit alleging that she was fired for not being Christian enough. Well, now this is interesting. Now, Patheos, secular humanist, progressive secular humanist, is reporting that a lawsuit filed in Texas documents that Gulf Winds International, which is a Texas logistics company, fired a woman named Deanne Thompson after she refused to hand out religious literature for her employer and expressed discomfort with the religious demands being placed on different company employees. Now, this is interesting because Gulf Winds International is a third-party logistics provider in the transportation industry. This is not a church. This is not a religious institution. So what are they doing handing out, basically having religious tests for you to work there? That's weird. Now, this is according to Courthouse News Service. Thompson, a 52-year-old mother with 5 daughters, was transferred to a different facility, demoted, and eventually fired after she had voiced opposition to the company's overtly religious practices, according to a lawsuit filed Tuesday in Harris County District Court. Thompson's lawsuit describes some of these alleged religious practices. Despite the fact that they are subject to laws regarding religious discrimination, defendant on a daily, routine, and regular basis send emails containing Christian religious information, quotes, and prayers to employees. The lawsuit states, defendant discriminated and retaliated against plaintiff based on religion and because of her opposition to force religious material in the workplace. In her lawsuit, Thompson said that she refused to distribute religious material while on the job. after she spoke up against Gulfwind's overtly religious practices, and as a result was transferred to another company facility and eventually terminated. Now, according to that same report, Thompson had told the company president during this that the employees reporting to her said that they were not comfortable being forced to distribute the religious books to drivers. So she was sending emails that were religious in nature, I guess because she was told to. It didn't have really anything to do with logistics. Just, hey, here you go. Send these emails, and oh, by the way, get your subordinates to go hand out these religious books to their drivers. Again, what does that have to do with logistics? Doesn't have anything to do with logistics. Now, the president reportedly then took Thompson out to lunch based on her complaint. Okay, so look, hey, the president sat down and said, hey, I understand your concerns. If you're not comfortable handing these out, and if the people you're handing them out to is, if they're uncomfortable, well, then don't do it. That's a pretty simple solution. Did they go in that direction? No. The president took Thompson out to lunch to say that, quote, she was not Christian enough and that she needed to examine her walk with Jesus. This is according to her complaint. We don't know what the other side is saying. Again, we haven't really gotten any information from the company. Now, this is interesting. Now, I'm gonna do a little thought experiment here for a second. Now, for those of you who are watching that are like, yeah, so what? What's the big deal? Well, imagine, again, this is Texas, right? Imagine if your boss took you out to lunch and said, hey, I don't think you're Muslim enough. You need to examine your walk with Allah. How would the reaction be? Especially if you work at a logistics company or that is Muslim, that is owned by Muslims, and they want you to hand out material with quotes from the Quran. Well, wait a minute in there. Oh, in any other, or hell, you put any other religion. I'm using Islam because that's the big example there. But say there's any other religion, Hinduism, Taoism, whatever, right? Whatever you want to put. Any other religion in there except for Christianity, you would have people in Texas, their hair would be on fire. Their heads would explode. Fire a woman for not passing out religious stuff or being very, very uncomfortable at a workplace that is supposed to be not necessarily religious in nature, not a religious institution like a church. Well, you have everybody that's essentially silent. These guys, look, this company, as I said, I keep saying that they're not a religious company because a company cannot have a religion. But here's what they say on their mission statement. Quote, our mission is to glorify God by providing world-class logistics services through continual investment in our people, clients, community, and the world we live in. So I guess one could make the argument against her, against the plaintiff, by saying, hey man, look, it says it right there in the mission statement, we're glorifying God by doing logistics. Well, it doesn't make any sense. How exactly does doing world-class logistics glorify God anyway? Look, you can be a religious person and you can believe whatever you want, but at the end of the day, I don't believe that you should be allowed to be a religious corporation. I don't think that's a thing that exists. For one, corporations aren't people. They don't have religions. They're not people. Anybody who thinks a corporation is a person and has free speech rights, right? First Amendment rights, including the right to be a religious institution or a religious corporation, is mental. And at the very least, they shouldn't have the right to fire people for not subscribing to that specific religion. Again, this is different from being a church, okay? A church is a nonprofit that specifically has a goal of, hey, we're a church, we're a religious institution, we're here to preach Jesus, right? So we hand out our materials, Bible, Quran, Torah, whatever we want to hand out, that's our job. This company is a for-profit entity. They're not supposed to be handing out religious materials to their employees. It just doesn't seem right. And they don't have the right, I don't think that they should have the right to fire people for not being religious. And also retaliating against people who don't share that religion or are a little uncomfortable with, hey, man, we're being a little, like I know it says in our mission statement we're glorifying God, but what does this have to do with my job? What does this have to do with logistics? Nothing. So this shouldn't be part of my job. You can't order me as your boss or as my boss to go and distribute religiously themed material to people who are obviously made very uncomfortable by it. That shouldn't be part of my job. It seems wrong on a lot of levels. And I think it's a pretty good example of what happens when you give corporations, when you say that corporations are people and have First Amendment rights, because they're not. Corporations are not people. They don't have religions, and I don't think they should be able to force their employees to be religious. And certainly, you should not be allowed to fire these employees for not being religious. So, I wish her luck on her lawsuit, because that, to me, it just seems incredibly wrong. Okay. That's it, man. That's all I got for you today. That's all I'm going to do. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll have another great show here, right here around the nation. Thanks for staying for the last hour. Tomorrow will be on same time, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here, live show. We'll have the full live show put up, unedited, for our patrons to go back and watch the whole thing. If you miss anything, for everybody else, we'll have videos up. So consider being a patron if you want if you want the full live show accessible at any time. Patreon.com/TYTNation. Please subscribe, share the videos, share the clips, and all that stuff. So it helps us immensely. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Love you guys, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation.